I just want to draw your attention to this exam question, this something that you could be asked in your exam around Elizabeth and her parliament and her government. So the question is, it's a 20-mark question. Parliament was unimportant in Elizabeth's reign. MPs simply did whatever the Queen and her ministers wanted. How far do you agree with this view? So this question is asking is suggesting that Elizabeth and her Privy Council, her ministers, could do whatever they wanted, and members of Parliament had no say really in the runnings of it. So I'm just going to give you some advice or some ideas to prompt you into what you could include in this answer. Because my advice would be to have a go at answering this question yourself once I've been through the key points. So to support that statement then, I would use the argument that Elizabethan government was not democratic. Okay, so the Queen ruled mostly by royal proclamation, and Parliament sat for only 35 months in Elizabeth's 45-year reign. So that's less than any other Tudor monarch. And if Elizabeth did not like a law, she simply refused to pass it. So she had she was a backstop for all of this, and she had the final say in what was passed. Also, thinking about the level of control that Elizabeth had within Parliament. So, for example, Elizabeth banned certain topics for discussion. So, marriage, foreign policy, the succession, religion as well. These were all banned. So, a Privy Council and Elizabeth, decided what Parliament should debate. And an example of the level of control that Elizabeth had. When Puritan MP Peter Wentworth demanded that Elizabeth named a successor after she had died, he was imprisoned in the Tower of London. Okay, we see that as like a bit of a common theme. Anyone who opposes Elizabeth, too much, then she deals with them quite harshly. Ways you could challenge this statement then, there's a few examples that you could use. So if we look at towards the end of Elizabeth's reign, we see that there's problems are increasing in England, such as war with Spain, poverty, famines. So we do actually see a bit of more of a reliance on Parliament, and Parliament is called more often than earlier on in her reign. So between 1580 and 1603, Elizabeth had to call Parliament more often because she needed laws and financial support to deal with religious threats and war with Spain. And also, I suppose it's worth mentioning here, isn't it, that if Elizabeth wanted new laws passed, she did have to pass them through Parliament. So she did need their final, seal of approval. Another example of how to challenge this statement. So in 1586, MPs demanded the execution of Mary Queen of Scots. It was very much, Privy Council driven. Members of Parliament, drove that execution. You could argue. So Elizabeth gave a vague answer, but agreed to the execution 3 months later. So you can see a bit of, Elizabeth being persuaded there by MPs. So, disagreeing with the statement that MP simply did whatever the Queen and their ministers wanted. And my final example would be looking at monopolies. So in 1601, MPs complained forcefully about the issue of monopolies. Elizabeth realised that she needed to compromise, and she made this famous speech called the Golden Speech to Parliament. And here she cancelled some of these monopolies and promised to look into others. Right, so we can see that element of compromise there. So overall, you've got on the one hand, It wasn't a democratic government. She controlled what was discussed in Parliament. She could simply refuse to pass a law if she didn't like it. However, on the other hand, Elizabeth needed and relied on Parliament a lot more towards the later years of her reign due to things like poverty and the war with Spain. She needed new laws to and financial support because of these issues. We also see this compromise in monopolies as well.